Well, hi, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I am an Episcopal priest living here in Austin, Texas, and I've had the gift of recovery since December 27th, 1972. Done it like everybody, one day at a time. And hope you'll visit our website if you haven't done it already, twowayprayer.org, and learn the practice that they used to do in early AA, the prayer and meditation piece that I'm afraid has been lost to the program. And I guess my guidance is to get out there and try to get that reestablished. So if these podcasts are helpful to you in any way, please share them with a friend, someone you're sponsoring. And if you have any comments or questions, uh, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me at twowayprayer, TWO, twowayprayer at gmail.com. Okay, so we're continuing with our series now where we're exploring the spiritual origins of AA. We're kind of asking the question, how did the 12-step program emerge out of the Oxford group? What were the things that we took with us from that group, and what were the things that were left behind? We're using a 1938 book titled The 8 Points of the Oxford Group. It's by C. Irving Benson. And one of the reasons I chose it is it gives us a lot of the principles that they were living by, and it's also free, so you can get it on the internet. Just put in the 8 points of the Oxford Group, and it should come up. You can also buy a copy from Amazon if you want one. So this episode, we're getting towards the end of the series, and this one is chapter 7 out of 8 in Benson's book, and it's titled Life Changers All. This chapter is about witnessing to the changes in our lives that are brought about by our changed relationship with God. See, this thing is really pretty simple. Change the relationship with God, your life is going to change. Now, one of the things to remember about our studies of the Oxford Group is that many of the principles and practices that became our steps, while they were taken directly from the group, there were a number of practices that were left behind. And this chapter focuses on one of those left behind items. And it has to do with witnessing. And that's a word we don't hear at all in AA. You'll hear it in Christian circles, in churches, particularly evangelical churches. The witnessing is a part of the practice. But we do it rather differently in most of our 12-step programs. Benson, of course, being a Christian, not in recovery, he begins his chapter with a brief study of how he believes Jesus handled this question of witnessing. So first he notes that Jesus started with a very small group of followers. And he adds, they were not a very impressive group either. Fishermen, reformed tax collectors, an ex-prostitute or two hanging around, common people who Benson says were pretty slow on the uptake. They kept missing the point. They didn't get it. Jesus would tell them something, and what do you mean by that? They had a hard time figuring it out. But they were the group, and this is the important thing. They were the group that Jesus had assembled. And everything depended on them. I read somewhere, can't remember where it was just now, but somebody back then was asking Jesus, they took a look at the group that he had assembled, and he said to him, have you got a plan B? Because plan A is not looking real good here. And his response was, this is metaphorical. No, there is no plan B. Everything depends upon you. And I think there's a wonderful message there. Sometimes we look around and say, is this the group I got? This the group of sponsees I've got, or whatever it might be. Yeah, this is the group. and this is the group I need to start from, to work with them. All right. And Jesus says to them, "You will be my witnesses, starting in Jerusalem and then going out to Judea and Samaria and even to the ends of the earth." And there's a progression there that it's good for us to understand. You start in Jerusalem, you start where you are. And then you go out to those in Judea. Well, Judea were the Jewish believers. That was the homeland. Okay, that makes some sense. And then go out to Samaria. Well, Samaria were the heathens, of the day. And then to the ends of the earth. So Jesus, with plan A, with a not too swift looking bunch of fellows around him, sent them on the mission. Now, Oxford Group, and this is one of the things that really attracted me to it, it was first called a First Century Christian Fellowship. And it's had a number of names over the years. But that was the first one, a First Century Christian Fellowship. And the idea that Frank Bookman had, the founder, was to get back to basics, get back to the principles and the practices that were a lived reality amongst that first century group of people. And that was a time when there was a lot of excitement and energy and power. Maybe that's really the key word. So start where you are. And I think a lot of this we can take into our programs. See, my whole belief is I don't just study this history thing for the sake of studying history. If it's not going to help us in our recovery, I'm not too interested in it. But if going back and studying these principles and practices leads to a deeper relationship with God and a deeper relationship with myself and a different understanding of what my role is in the world, then I'm all in and I'm really interested. So, how do we take from this some lessons for us to learn? Well, maybe the first is start where you are. Jesus said, in Jerusalem, you may be in Chicago or you may be in Detroit. And that's the way things were in the very beginning. Begin where you are. Smooth things moving from Akron and New York out to Cleveland, out to Chicago, out to Detroit. You read the stories of the first people who were getting the message. They'd go to Dr. Bob's in Akron, they'd get sober, and off they would go, kind of like missionaries. So you start where you are in your own hometown, your own community, among your own neighbors and your friends. Bill Wilson wanted to really have missionaries in the beginning. That was his idea, but the groups turned him down. They said, no, that's not the way to go. But when he sent them out, when they were sent out, both the drunks and the early followers of Jesus, it's important to focus on what it is they were asked to do. And this is where I think, again, we can learn something from this first century Christian bunch. Tell them what happened to you. That's the vital element. Don't preach. Tell your story. Oxford Group founder Frank Bookman said, don't witness one word beyond telling your own experience. In other words, people need to hear your story from you. And they would practice telling their story. What was wrong? How are they living their life that was out of whack? What changed them and what it's like now? I mean, those are the very words we use to this day. So to share your experience, your strength, your hope, that's really what makes you very special. There is nobody, absolutely nobody in the world who has your experience. Nobody. That's why we're here. Okay, that's why there's 7.5 billion of us. Uh, that we have an experience of not God and of God. We have the experience of living without God, and we have the experience then of living with God. And that's the message that people are really hungry to hear. So Benson quotes, interestingly, from Edward Gibbon's famous historian, 19th century, on the rise and the fall of the Roman Empire was his great work. And in his books, he has a chapter on why did Christianity spread. Um, and Gibbons writes this: it became the most sacred duty of the new convert to diffuse among his friends and relations the that's a tough one, inestimable blessings which he had received. In other words, something happened to me. Let me tell you what it was. I mean, you just can't get more simple, more basic than that. And yet, that was the thing, the personal experience of change that happened in you, in your life. And that was what you wanted to then go out and share. How did you change? How did you find the answer to life in the Christian piece? How did you find the answer to staying sober in the alcoholic piece? I remember meeting a guy. He was leading the meeting. He was telling a story. He had 10 years sobriety, and I'm sitting there with a few weeks, and he could just as well have come down from Mars. I mean, he was that foreign to me. I needed a guy who had 90 days or 6 months or 3 months. How'd you do it? How did you do it? Tell me your story. Tell me what worked for you, because I'm desperate and I need to know that. See, Benson has a nice quote here. He says, in the last century, so he's talking about the back in the 1800s, earnest souls sought to save men and women lest they should go to hell. The urge to witness today is that men and women are already living in hell. It was a shift from emphasis on missionaries to finding people real close to home who are in bad shape and who need what we have. Benson has a chapter in there subtitled The Art of Catching Men. And he says, set yourself out to win one man. Make him a target, a test case. Find out what he's interested in. You know, it sent me back to reading the chapter in the big book, Working with Others. And, you know, if you know some of the Oxford Group history, that chapter makes more sense, because there was a way that they would work with the new guy that's pretty different, I think, from how we handle things today. You know, so they'd set their sights on a particular candidate. This is what you say on the first visit, the second visit. Don't be discouraged if he doesn't respond all at once. Our only purpose is to be helpful. We might lose an opportunity later when he's more ready. Don't cram the religion thing down his throat. You know, tell him your experience. Tell him you were hopeless and what happened. It's that journey from hopelessness to hope. It's very individualized. And today, I think we are much more likely, unfortunately, to say, you know, if you want what we have, that's fine, and if you don't let the door hit you in the ass. You know? And that's sad, and that is something again that we can learn, I think, from going back to the Oxford Group history, that they took each case real seriously, and in the beginning, it certainly wasn't about numbers. Uh, I've fallen captive to that problem myself. You know, I sometimes look around. Well, how many people are practicing two-way prayer? Well, that's not the issue. I mean, my issue is, am I doing what I'm asked to do with any individual who is serious about wanting it and then getting the word out to other people who could benefit from it. And again, you start where you are. I had a friend, counselor back in Detroit. His name was Clark Newton, African American fella, and I think I've told this story before, but it really impressed me. And Clark was a counselor at a place that I was eventually working at, and we would ask him, Clark, you making some money now? Clark was a street guy, you know, and he wouldn't leave his neighborhood, and he was living in the hood. And we'd say, well, Clark, why don't you come on, get an apartment over here on this side of town? It's much better. And he would always say, no, no, this is where I did my drinking and my drugging. And people watch me when I walk down the street. And that's witnessing, you see? He's witnessing to those people. And they said every once in a while, one will come up to him and say, hey, Clark, how'd you do it? How'd you do it? And then he would tell him his story. Now, the Oxford group was out to change the world. But one of the things I've learned from talking throughout the history with individuals who've been associated with it is it started by changing people one at a time. And that was the recognition that that's the only way you're going to change the world. You got to change that one person first. And that one person has to change at some level of depth. And if you get enough of those people, then they will go out and change the world. But if you go out and try to use unchanged people to change the world, not much is going to happen. It's going to really fall flat. And I think we suffer from some of that today. It's kind of the mass production of AA. And I don't know that AA or any 12-step program is really ripe for mass production. I think it always was and always will be an individual deal. And get a few changed people. That was Bookman's original thing. Give me a few really changed people, and we'll change the world. Not 100 unchanged people. It just isn't going to happen. There's an address that was given by a fellow by the name of Judge John T. And it was on the 4th anniversary of the Chicago group in AA. It was delivered in 1943. I heard this read many, many years ago. Really moved me. I'm going to read it to you now. I want you to listen with open ears and encourage you to go to the internet. Just put in the words, why we were chosen, AA, and it'll come up. Lots of, not versions, but different websites that have it. Why we were chosen. So here goes. John said, God in his wisdom has selected a group of men to be the purveyors of his goodness. In selecting those through whom he would bring about this phenomenon, he went not to the proud, the mighty, the famous, or the brilliant. He went to the humble, to the sick, to the unfortunate. He went to the drunkard, the so-called weakling of the world. Well might he have said to us, into your weak and feeble hands I have entrusted a power beyond estimate. To you has been given that which has been denied the most learned of your fellows. Not to scientists or statesmen, not to wives or mothers, not even to my priests and ministers have I given this gift of healing other alcoholics, which I now entrust to you. It must be used unselfishly. It carries with it grave responsibility. No day can be too long. No demands upon your time can be too urgent. No case too pitiable. No task too hard. No effort too great. It must be used with tolerance. for I have restricted its application to no race, no creed, and no denomination. Personal criticism you must expect. Lack of appreciation will be common. Ridicule will be your lot. Your motives will be misjudged. Success will not always attend your efforts in your work with other alcoholics. You must be prepared for adversity, for what men call adversity is the ladder you must use to ascend the rungs towards spiritual perfection. And remember, in the exercise of this power, I shall not exact of you beyond your capabilities. You are not selected because of exceptional talents. And be careful always, if success attends your efforts, not to ascribe to personal superiority that to which you can lay claim only by virtue of my gift. If I had wanted learned men to accomplish this mission, the power would have been entrusted to the physician and the scientist. If I had wanted eloquent men, there would have been many anxious for the assignment. For talk is the easiest used of all the talents with which I have endowed mankind. If I had wanted scholarly men, the world is filled with many better qualified than you who would have been available. Listen to this. You were selected because you have been the outcasts of the world, and your long experience as drunkards has made or should make you humbly alert to the cries of distress that come from the lonely hearts of alcoholics everywhere. Keep in mind the admission that you made on the day of your profession into AA, namely that you are powerless, and that it was only with your willingness to turn your life and your will into my keeping that relief came to you. Why we were chosen. Those are powerful words. That's a powerful message. And lack of power is exactly what our dilemma is. And as the big book says, God has all power. May we find him now. So let me kind of focus in on that power word, because that's the word that Benson uses to close his chapter, and I'll close this episode with that as well. Benson says this: power is promised. Power is available. Our Lord promises that just where we are defective, he will supply the needed help. Wow. Just where we are defective, there he will supply the needed help. It's in our weakness that we find God. He is our strength. He is our power. And the whole idea behind this Oxford Group thing, behind the early AA thing, was this lack of power, that God has that power, and that what we need to do is let him now begin to control our lives. They called it God control. All right? They were life changers, and they would witness to one another and to the world about the changes that had come about in their own lives. I think that's what two-way prayer is all about. Asking God to take control of our lives, asking only for the knowledge of his will for us, the knowledge of his will, and for the power to carry that out. Lack of power, our dilemma. God has all power. Find it, and then go witness to those he guides you to. I want to thank you for listening. God bless, and keep coming back.